Welcome to the Last Drop Water Researchers Speaker Series. If you have an interest in water sustainability issues, this speaker series is for you. The Last Drop is brought to you by the University of Manitoba's Academic Impact Hub for Sustainable Development Goal 6 Working Group. In 2018, the university was named the Chair Hub. And in 2025, the UM successfully applied to renew this role, and we now have the honor of co-chairing with the Shiv Nadar Institution of Eminence, deemed to be a university in India. The Sustainable Development Goal 6 Working Group at the U of M brings together established and emerging leaders who have a shared interest in freshwater sustainability and who are working collaboratively with local, national, and global partners to address issues related to water. We have a wide variety of members here on U of M campus, including members from the Clayton H. Riddell Faculty of Environment, Earth and Resources, Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences, Faculty of Architecture, Faculty of Arts, and more. The SDG group's expertise spans multiple disciplines, including leading researchers from across the humanities, social sciences, and STEM fields. My name is Nicole Wilson, and I'm an assistant professor and Canada Research Chair in Arctic Environmental Change and Governance at the Centre for Earth Observation Science and the Department of Environment and Geography in the Clayton H. Riddell Faculty of Environment. So I co-chair the UM working group with Claire Herbert. Today, we can give you a little bit of background information on the UNAI Hub at University of Manitoba, as well as on the Just Waters research project, which is co-sponsoring this webinar. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind putting those links in the chat. In this virtual format, we are all coming from different locations. So I want to acknowledge that I'm located in Winnipeg, Manitoba, within Treaty 1, and that the university campuses and research spaces are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuak, Anisinuak, Dakota Ayate, Dene, and Inuit, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. So in the theme of today's panel, and I guess all of today's presentation, and I guess all of the webinars that are part of this series, which is about water, I want to acknowledge that my drinking water comes from Shoal Lake through the Winnipeg Aqueduct, which was constructed in 1919 at the expense of Shoal Lake 40 First Nations water security. Today, we have a talk by Dr. Mihir Shah. Before we begin, I just want to run through a few logistics, and then I'll give a much more in-depth introduction to Dr. Shah. We will enable closed captioning, so feel free to turn that on as needed. This talk will be recorded and will be posted to our UM sustainability channel. And Sarah will also provide the link to that, which is one place you can look at recordings of previous talks. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and there'll be time for Q&A at the end, so feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A box. Finally, I'd like to say that for members of the audience who would like to learn more about or kind of join the SDG working group, you can visit our website that actually Sarah had just shared the link for previously. So now let's begin. Again, we are very honored to have Dr. Mihir Shah, who's a distinguished professor at the Shiv Nadar University, who will be presenting on water challenges in the Anthropocene, lessons from India. So from 2009 to 2014, Dr. Shah was a member of the Planning Commission, Government of India, holding the portfolio of water resources, rural development, and Panchayati Raj. He is the youngest ever member of the Planning Commission. Dr. Shah was chiefly responsible for drafting the paradigm shift in the management of water resources announced in the 12th five-year plan. He also initiated a makeover of the MGNREGA, the largest employment program in human history, with a renewed emphasis on rural livelihoods based on construction of productive assets. In 2019 to 2021, he chaired the Government of India's committee to draft the new national water policy. This is the first time ever that a person from outside government was asked to chair this committee. Dr. Shah graduated in economics from the St. Stephen's School in Delhi University, where he won the prestigious K.C. Nag Economics Prize, and did his postgraduate from the Delhi School of Economics in the 1970s, before going on to complete a doctoral dissertation at the Center for Development Studies in Kerala. Among many other accomplishments that these are just listing a few of the accomplishments that Dr. Shah has shared with us, and that we have shared our full biography in the registration link. But we are so honored to have such an esteemed professor here to present to us about their work. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Shah now, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure being here with all of you. It's late at night in India, but I know that people, actually students and colleagues from all over the world, have intimated me that they are joining this presentation. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to speak to all of you. Really, the talk would have three different parts. I'm calling something the mid-20th century water policy paradigm. And the first part of the talk will be what I mean by the mid-20th century water policy paradigm. The second part will be about what problems this paradigm has created and why we need to make a change, why we need what I call a paradigm shift in this water policy way of doing water. And finally, it will be about how we can make the shift, what we learn from the experience of India, from what India has done so far in terms of the mistakes it might have made, but also in terms of the great innovations that have been tried in India in the last decade or so. So to jump right into it, I am contending that much of humanity still remains stuck in the mid-20th century paradigm of command and control over river systems and relentless extraction of groundwater. These are the two pillars on which water policy since the mid-20th century has been based in large parts of the world. That we build large reservoirs, large dam structures on our river systems. We try to link rivers with each other based on this kind of construction of large dams, on the one hand. And on the other, we engage in relentless extraction of groundwater. Water management is governed by the disciplines of engineering and hydrogeology and completely ignores the need for a trans-disciplinary and community-based approach to a common pool resource like water. And it pretends as if the interconnectedness across different elements of the water cycle simply does not exist. So, what have been the consequences of this paradigm, especially at a time when we live in an era of what we call the Anthropocene, where humanity induced climate change is happening across the planet? So, my contention is that the policy itself, the way we have looked at water itself, has engendered a major and growing crisis of water. We have falling water tables everywhere, and there are major concerns with water quality, with nitrate, uranium, arsenic, fluoride increasingly found in drinking water, leading to grave health concerns. More and more river systems are running dry, and conflicts of water are growing by the day. And in the context of climate change, we have two major issues of concern. One, as the climate scientists would like to say, the assumption of stationarity no longer holds, which means that even more than in the past, today the past is no longer a reliable indicator of what is to come in the future, because things have become so unpredictable and there were so many more frequent intense climate events that we cannot continue with business as usual. And the crisis, therefore, is forcing us to realize that we need to make an urgent paradigm shift in both policy and action around water. The Indian experience, as I said, is deeply instructive because we learn from the kinds of mistakes that have been made and also from the multiple innovations that have been proposed in recent decades. This talk is an attempt to share some important learnings that emerge from this experience, and this is based on my own attempts at shaping this policy both at the grassroots. I'm speaking to you from a remote tribal hinterland region of central India, where I have worked for the last 30 years to bring about this change on the ground, and also the learnings I have from trying to shape policy at the highest echelons of government, as was said in the brief introduction to my work. So, to begin, I would like to disabuse everyone from a notion that India is a water scarce country. Actually, there is an abundance of water in India, which is extremely rich in the resources that nourish a sustained supply of water. We get an annual average rainfall of over 1,000 millimeters, and the Hindu Kush Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau are a source of 10 major river systems that provide water to nearly 2 billion people in India and its neighborhood. We have richly forested catchment areas throughout the country, and we have among the largest aquifer systems in the world. But the crisis is real. It is estimated that with business as usual, if we continue with the mid 20th century paradigm of water policy, about half of the demand for water will already be unmet within 5 years' time. Water tables are falling across the country, and water levels falling and water quality issues characterize 60% of India's districts. The growing incidence of cancer has become an issue of major national concern. A 2018 study of 55 river systems shows decline in annual runoff, which is normalized for rain. So the decline is not because of a decline in rain in any particular year, but 55 major river systems show a decline in their river flows. And if this trend continues, these rivers will soon run dry. And we have major interstate conflicts over water, which are proving intractable and impossible to resolve. This graph summarizes to you the fact that India is the largest user of groundwater in the world. Number two and number three are China and the US, and the total of what China and the US consume is less than what India consumes in a year. These maps show the following groundwater levels and quality across different parts of the country, with some areas being afflicted much more seriously than others. But overall, as I said, 60% of India's districts are showing problems of falling groundwater levels and quality. This is an illustration of one of the major river basins, which shows a decline in the annual precipitation normalized base flows over 5 years. And it's not just a question of the quantity of water flowing in the rivers, it's also of the quality. India is supposed to be a country where people revere their rivers. And there is a custom of taking what is called a holy dip, which means you go into the river to purify yourself of the sins that you may have committed in your life. But if you look at India's second largest river, and one of the major sites for this holy dip in one of the major festivals in a city in Maharashtra called Nashik in 2016, the Ram Kund, this is the kind of state of a river which is supposed to be revered. So I think we have deeply neglected our river systems, and this is posing a major challenge for water in India. At the same time, in our cities, there were large systems of water bodies, of lakes. But this is a famous lake called Belandur, which is on fire, if you may believe, in one of India's largest cities of Bangalore, which has many, many lakes like this, because millions of gallons of sewage enter the lake every day. And this lake catches fire, whether through solid or liquid waste floating on its surface or flammable methane generated from its oxygen starved waters. So, is this a paradox of plenty? On the one hand, I say this is a water abundant country, but it seems to be facing a major water crisis. The answer simply lies in very poor governance and management of water. If we look at the investments in water since independence, we have invested 50 billion US dollars in large dams, but trillions of liters of water stored in these dams are not reaching the farmers for whom the water is meant. We have also overlooked the fact that nearly two-thirds of India is underlain by hard rock formations and that groundwater is a common pool resource. What has happened is we have drilled endlessly for this groundwater without a care for tomorrow. And what that has resulted in is that this deep drilling for groundwater has become part of the problem itself. To paraphrase President Trump, drill, baby, drill has created a major problem in India. And that I'm talking about only about water. Forget if we were getting into other issues like oil. And the single most important factor explaining falling water tables, water quality, and drying up of India's rivers is the unbridled competitive extraction of what is actually a common pool resource, which needs a very different system of management and governance. India is a land of great lithodiversity, and you cannot say that one size fits all. As this map shows, India has many, many aquifer formations with very different kinds of storage and transmission characteristics. But we have applied a one size fits solution. We keep drilling deeper and deeper for groundwater, and we actually go on deepening the water crisis as a result. So, what is it that we can do? Where do the solutions lie? We need to make a total rejig of the very foundations of our water and related policies. I often say, what does he know of water who only water knows? We cannot understand water without realizing that we need to make changes in related policies which impact the water sector. To begin with, we must address the demand side. We cannot continue to obsess with endlessly increasing supply because that is a mirage. You cannot meet the growing demands of water through more and more supply side solutions if you do not address the demand side, and I'll explain in a minute how we can do that. We must also not be blind to the links between catchment areas, aquifers, rivers, and water supplies. What we need to do is to acknowledge these links and actually leverage these links to solve the water problem rather than aggravate the water problem by being blind to these interconnectednesses in different elements of the water cycle. We, I believe, need to adopt the principle of subsidiarity, which says that solutions must be found closest to where the problems are. And for that, a community involved approach to water management and governance is required. We must also bridge the silos into which we have divided water and adopt a trans-disciplinary approach to solving our water problem. We must build in resilience, agility, and flexibility to tackle the urgent challenges of climate change. So let me explain these points one by one. First, how do we address the demand side? The first thing we do is to acknowledge that most of the water in India, the most of the demand for water comes from agriculture. 90% of India's water goes to agriculture. But when we do a deeper dive into the agriculture sector, we realize that 80% of India's agriculture water is guzzled by three crops. Just three crops, wheat, rice, and sugarcane, take up most of India's water. And why do farmers grow these crops, even in water short regions? They grow these crops because government actually incentivizes farmers to grow these crops because these are the crops which are bought by government at what is called a minimum support price, that is wheat and rice, which was required at the time of the Green Revolution 50 years ago when India faced a major food grain crisis. But today we have overflowing stocks of food grain, but we haven't still changed this policy of monoculture across the length and breadth of India. So the solution is that we should introduce low water requiring millets, pulses, and oil seeds into public procurement so that farmers are incentivized to grow these crops which are more in alignment with the diverse agroecology of different parts of India. And if we include these crops in our child nutrition programs, which are the largest in the world, we could go a very long way to simultaneously solving our water problem, our farm problem, our nutrition problem, and our health problem. And to solve the health problem, we also need to move away from the kind of chemical farming that we introduced during the Green Revolution towards a more location-specific agroecological farming paradigm, which improves soil organic carbon, it improves soil structure, and provides huge economies in water use. We have conducted very intensive, detailed studies across the country on the kinds of economies in water use that can come about if we make even a slight shift in the cropping pattern towards crops which are more aligned to the diverse agroecology of different parts of India. If we come to the large dam structures, now there is a big debate on whether we should have built these dams, how much harm they have done. I am actually not going into that debate. All I'm saying is we have created these structures, but the water stored in these structures, in these large reservoirs, is not reaching the farmers for whom it is meant. And without building a single new dam, by adopting a participatory irrigation management system, we can actually add 24 million hectares to irrigated area in India. And this is an estimate made by the Niti Aayog of the Government of India. And we can completely avoid the great tragedies of human displacement and environmental destruction that has been a result of building more and more dam structures without building a single new dam. Through adopting what is called PIM, we can add a large area of 24 million hectares to irrigation. What is required is to form water users associations of farmers who can effectively manage this water. And this prescription, this policy prescription I'm making, is based on examples from all over India and actually all over the world. Successful irrigation management transfer has happened only where we have empowered farmers to manage commands on their own, which has ensured that the tail end of the command will also get water. And these farmers are all willing to pay a price for the service, what is called an irrigation service fee, which also helps meet the operation and maintenance costs of these systems, which have to be managed by the farmers themselves. When we come to groundwater, the difficulty has been that again we have not respected diversity, we have not involved the people. What we have done is to try and police 40 million groundwater structures to what is sometimes in India described as the license quota permit Raj, which simply means you send water inspectors and try and restrict farmers from drilling deeper and deeper groundwater structures. But as you can imagine, that solution will never work. The way forward is location specific participatory aquifer management, as millions of farmers have shown in many states across the length and breadth of India. What is done is demand side management, crop water budgeting with groundwater recharge, which enables the country to both preserve and make best use of its groundwater throughout the 21st century. My statement in summary is don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. It simply means don't take an extreme environmentalist position which says we have to preserve the water at any cost. What we need to do is to preserve the water in such a way that it enables the use of this water by the millions of small and marginal farmers across the country. As I said, India's river systems are in great disarray. And what we need to remember is that the state of our rivers, the health of our rivers depends on the health of their catchment areas. Catchment areas are simply the areas from which rivers catch their water. You know, in India, there is a great belief that the waters of the Ganga, what sometimes in the West is called the Ganges, they have great medicinal properties. And this is not a superstitious belief. Actually, this has to do with the kind of vegetation we have in the Himalayan catchments from which the river originates. But given the destruction of the Himalayan catchment areas, the medicinal properties of the Ganga are also now falling into disarray. And I often remind people of the way New York City managed its watersheds. By keeping the river basin healthy and green, the city has ensured wonderful supply of water for its residents. It involved a great engagement of the civil bodies governing New York City with the people living in the watershed areas of New York. And this blue green infrastructure, as it is called now, has ensured clean water supply for the city. And this has been now adopted by major cities across the world. This, what is called the compensation for ecosystem services, is now being practiced across the world in many countries, including China, Brazil, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Ethiopia, to only name a few. So, this approach of actually improving the health of the catchment areas can be a solution for river systems across the world and will mean a major paradigm shift from the earlier paradigm of just building large dam structures, ignoring the health of the catchment areas of our river systems. This approach is sometimes described as participatory watershed management. The lifeline of a river or a water body is its catchment area. The healthier its catchment, the healthier will be rivers, dams, and ponds. Watershed management is a location specific approach to treatment of catchment areas. It aims to reduce the volume and velocity of runoff, reduce soil erosion, and increase groundwater recharge by weaving our interventions into the contours of nature. So it breaks with the old paradigm of command and control of nature. It converts us into students of nature who carefully understand the nature of the topography and then adopt location specific interventions. And I'll just illustrate a number of them through a quick run through of many photographs from areas where I have personally done this work in catchment areas in many districts of central India. What we do is not bring exotic species from the outside, but regenerate the forest with plantations of location specific species. On the higher slopes, you dig contour trenches. Essentially, these trenches are able to hold water for a limited period of time and reduce the volume and velocity of water as it flows down the watershed. Similarly, we build earthen contour bunds. These are very low cost structures based on local material. The aim in every case is to reduce the volume and velocity of water flowing down the catchment area so that as you go downstream, there is greater groundwater recharge and there is a reduction in soil erosion. Similarly, we can, on the small river streams which flow through the watershed, we build these very low cost structures, simply putting together the boulders, the rocks which are available in the catchment area. In slightly larger streams, we build what are called gabion structures, which are larger rock dams held together by wire meshes. Then, as we go down the watershed, we build these very beautiful structures. Again, they are earthen structures, they are mud dams, but they prove a tremendous source of groundwater recharge, maintaining groundwater levels throughout the watershed. As we come to the farms themselves, farmers give up a small percentage of their farm area to construct these kind of farm ponds, which help provide protective irrigation in those periods during which there is a gap in rainfall during the monsoon. Similarly, the farms are bunded again to keep soil moisture at a good level, which can support crops when the rain has stopped during the monsoon. On larger river systems, we built these kind of stone masonry check dams, and a little bit of cement is used. So we have tried in our approach of watershed management to minimize use of external inputs, but these are again very low cost structures which serve multiple purposes of irrigation, fishery, tourism, etc., etc. Now, all of this, all of this new paradigm requires a very new form of management and governance, and I call it ending the three kinds of hydroschizophrenia, which simply means that we have to think of irrigation and drinking water together. Typically, what happens is when you have a drinking water system, a supply system, if the same source of drinking water is being used for irrigation, irrigation uses much more water than drinking water, and the tube well or the well which is supplying drinking water soon runs dry because of over exploitation for irrigation. Similarly, if we don't bring groundwater and surface water together, if they remain in separate silos, what happens typically is that India's river systems have been drying up because the water they get after the monsoon comes from the base flows of groundwater. Once the groundwater is over extracted, the river flows themselves are negatively impacted. So we have to break the silo between drinking water and irrigation, between surface water and groundwater, and also between water and wastewater. Because we have not managed the two together, water supply systems are contaminated by untreated wastewater. So we must end these three kinds of hydroschizophrenia, which have divided water into silos. And this is true of systems across the world. Again, we need to bring in new disciplines into water governance. There are only engineers and hydrogeologists managing water across the country. What we need are people from social sciences in management, because if participatory surface and groundwater management has to happen, if river rejuvenation has to happen, if conflict resolution has to be done, we need people trained in this science. We need a different cropping pattern for which we need agronomists. We need an understanding of the value of ecosystem services, for which we need ecological economists. And if we want to undertake river rejuvenation, we need the science of river ecology. I would only end by saying that ultimately, whether or not countries are able to adopt this new paradigm of water depends on the kind of democratic pressure that the people of the country are able to bring upon governments. How important water becomes as a political issue, how much can we mobilize people to argue for this paradigm shift, is very important. Because otherwise, what has happened is there is an insistent refusal to learn from decades of experience, of the new knowledge that has become available, and also of the unprecedented circumstances that we find ourselves in the Anthropocene. In India, the 12th five-year plan, the Mihir Shah Committee report of 2016, and the new National Water Policy of 2020 have all outlined in full detail how this new paradigm of water management and governance can be implemented in every part of the water sector in India. The real question is, will the people be able to persuade and push governments to actually undertake each of these path breaking proposals for reform? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And so we will open the question and answer period. Maybe if we could minimize the slides, then we'll be able to see each other a little bit better, if that's possible.
Okay.
So we have a Q&A box here. We have a lot of applause coming forward. If you have questions, put them into the Q&A box. And there's quite a few people online, so I'm sure some will be rolling in. I was, particularly struck by this, idea about moving beyond silos. And I think there's many different types of silos, of course. And here we're obviously situated in a really different context in Manitoba and Canada and in the global north, but still we have these struggles in terms of getting people from across the disciplines together, and then also working with societal actors, because you can't approach water without all of these different angles and expertise, right? So I'm curious, from your collaborations and your experiences, what are some of the best practices or the good examples that you've come across of these types of transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary collaborations?
Yeah, actually, everything that I said in my presentation is based on actual practice on the ground. And that's what gives hope. It's true that across the country or across the world, we don't have a mainstreaming of this approach. But there are many parts of the world where all of these approaches have been tried out. For example, as I said, there are large reservoirs being built on river systems across the world. But there are many examples where a participatory approach to irrigation management has been successfully adopted. What has happened is farmers have been brought together, a lot of social mobilization happens, a lot of awareness building happens. People get a sense that, yes, this is our water and we need to manage and govern it well, which means that farmers come together. They actually decide on the kind of irrigation service fees they will pay for water reaching their farm. This is a very important element, because when you build a large dam structure, it's the engineers who built it. They even build the large canal systems, but they are typically not trained to mobilize people to actually know how to manage and govern the water. And that requires a very different kind of expertise. So a lot of that social mobilization has happened in command areas in India, across the world. There are major studies on participatory irrigation management, which show that when these water users associations of farmers are empowered, suitably empowered, to not only manage their water, but to collect the irrigation service fees and then to retain those fees with themselves, not to hand it over to the irrigation department, which then gets into a bureaucracy and never comes back to the people themselves. When people have the power to retain that revenue, then they are able to actually manage the operation and management of maintenance of these systems becomes something which people take on. And I must tell you, the key, which I didn't mention in the presentation, is leadership of women. Wherever women have been in the lead, women farmers have ensured that these participatory systems are a great success. But where the water users associations are only on paper, then a lot of, because there is a, this became a buzzword that you should do PIM everywhere. But unless there is a lot of social mobilization done on the ground and women take the lead, the PIM has not worked. This is just one example. I can multiply many others, but
I'm
just to
sure
give.
you have many others. We actually do have a couple of questions in the chat though. So Ranjan Suranjan, who is a member of our UNAI group here at U of M, says, when water is limited, there's greater risk of soil salinization. What is the extent of salinization of agricultural lands and what percent, do you know?
Well, it's a very good question, because in the coastal regions of India, one of the major consequences over extraction of groundwater, which I did not touch upon in the presentation, is the salinization. It's the coastal salinity which gets into farmlands, and this becomes almost an irreversible problem. That's one situation. There is another situation in states like Punjab, where actually over irrigation has led to waterlogging and the rise of salts from below the ground onto agricultural lands. So the extent is still not that huge, because these are only specific kinds of ecologies where this problem becomes very major. But the coastal regions of India and regions which have been over irrigated through large dam structures have faced this problem, and it's actually very difficult to retrieve these lands. What we have to do then is to do a lot of fresh rainwater harvesting to dilute the levels of salinity. Often you do brackish water fisheries, because you can no longer do crop farming in those lands, such as in Punjab. We have adopted that as a solution. But the real answer is, again, not to do the over extraction of groundwater, not to over irrigate land with these large canal systems, which has happened in states like Rajasthan and Punjab and has happened in many parts of the world. So salinity is a self-created problem, and that's why I'm calling for this paradigm shift from away from the mid 20th century. We can understand the challenges at that time when there was a palpable need for water for economic development, etc. But we should learn from the experience of, it's nearly 80 years of this kind of paradigm of water policy, and we do need to make a shift.
Definitely agreed on the need to make a shift. So we have a few other questions. One from an anonymous attendee. They said, can you speak to international water treaties and how these can be leveraged to move on, to move kind of beyond the three contradictions in water management that you talked about?
So that's the trickiest problem of them all. I mean, I'll just give the example, you know, of the Indian subcontinent itself. So we have the Himalayas. The Himalayas are a shared ecological treasure, of all the Himalayan countries. But what's happening is there is a competitive rush. I call it the competitive destruction of the Himalayas, because what you're doing is one country is saying, I'll build more dams than you. What we are forgetting in this race, and not going into the kind of international agreements we need to have to share this water and to protect the Himalayan ecology. What we need to do is to actually understand that without that agreement, we will destroy the very resource which we say, is the source of so many, as I said, 2 billion people are dependent on the Himalayan ecosystem. And this can become a very major problem. So what this means is that the paradigm shift must not happen within each country, but also across countries. And this common understanding, a new understanding of water, has to inform transboundary agreements. Otherwise, each one, finally, it's a lose-lose that we are creating. So there's short-term wins, but it's not even a short-term win, because kind of landslides that are happening across the Himalayan region, especially in the recent kind of heavy, intense rainfall events that we are having, thanks to climate change in particular. The urgency of this need for a transboundary agreement on sharing these waters becomes even more urgent.
Thank you. So the next question, Ayush Kumar, Dr. Ayush Kumar here from University of Manitoba says, thanks for your talk. I'm following up on the question regarding breaking silos. What are your thoughts or advice on academics engaging with society or people?
No, I mean, there's nothing more important than that, I can tell you. That's what I've done all my life. I've worn many hats. I've been a social activist. I've been in government. I've been an academic. And I think we need to get academics to come out of the ivory towers of academia, as I call them, because without that, even our understanding of water, understanding of issues around water will remain limited, because we need that grassroots experience which comes from civil society. But civil society needs the kind of scholarship that academia brings to understand what we see at the micro level with a broader systems understanding of, because these are large systems, and if you look very deeply into a small microcosm of the system, you miss, as they say, the woods for the trees. And it's very important to take the larger systemic view. So both for academics and for civil society, this partnership is deeply invaluable, and I would hope that through the kind of initiatives that you've taken to promote the SDGs, and we are taking now that both our universities are working together, I would say we must push for deeper links between academia and civil society, so that our understanding of these problems becomes much deeper, and our and our knowledge of the solutions, the potential solutions, also becomes richer.
Mm, wonderful. So the next question is from Arshnor. They said, as human activities are changing the environment more than ever, how can India deal with the growing pressure on water from rising population, pollution, poor coordination between institutions, and issues like corruption? In your view, what key issues or reforms are needed to ensure fair and sustainable water future for the country? Just a small question there.
Yes, I mean, a lot of what I said is an answer to your question. Your question is absolutely pertinent and important. But I think there is a whole menu of reforms that we need, which means first abandoning this paradigm which is about command and control over water. We have to understand that nature has its own way of teaching us very bitter lessons. And the more we move into the 21st century, COVID, for example, is a bitter illustration of what happens when you violate nature in the way we have done, and then we have to pay a price for that. The kinds of floods that we are having with these kind of intense rainfall events. But we have to therefore learn that we cannot continue with this dam building spree in an ecologically fragile and a very young geological mountain system like the Himalayas. That means that you are going to make these events even worse. So, there is, on the one hand, we've already induced climate change through our actions through the 20th century. And now, when those extreme weather events are happening, we need to be very careful in not undertaking destructive construction activities within those fragile ecologies. In fact, we need to do the reverse. What we are seeing as a problem is actually our great strength. The green Himalayas, the green Western Ghats across the length and breadth of the country and across all countries in the world, they are rich resources. They are ecosystem services. I gave the example of New York because sometimes people think I'm only talking of the South and poorer countries, but actually the richest countries in the world, those who are prepared themselves for the climate resilience required at a time of the Anthropocene, all of them have shifted to what we are calling blue green infrastructure, which means protecting the natural systems within even our urban spaces. And there are so many examples of that across the world, where the fact that you have lake systems, they can help moderate the impact of intense rainfall events. The fact that you have lake systems can actually help recharge groundwater levels. So using these ecosystem services and actually paying people, compensating them for protecting what nature is providing, that can become a tremendous source of sustenance and livelihoods for those people and for the services that we require in the rest of the country. So it's a win-win which we need to try and create, as against the lose-lose that, that we're going down the drain of actually destroying the ecology, which can help sustain us.
Okay. We had one this is a comment, Saravan Naraman, Murguris. You have to excuse my pronunciation. Thank you for your insightful presentation, they said, and they just expressed questions about the groundwater intake and groundwater recharge, but maybe we'll recharge ratio. So, but maybe that's more of a technical question we'll leave aside for now, unless you have any direct.
I mean, that's a very important question. Because I didn't get time to elaborate, because that's actually the heart of India's water problem. See, we have different kind of aquifers in different parts of the country, and this is true of the whole world. There is tremendous diversity in nature. What we have done is that we have adopted solutions such as drilling deep for groundwater, which are good for an aquifer system which has high rates of natural recharge, where the storage and transmission characteristics of the aquifers are such that even if you drill deep, the aquifer can be replenished quite quickly. But two-thirds of India, for example, is underlain by hard rock formations. Now, these are basaltic rocks. These are rocks which have formed over thousands of years, and they have very low rates of groundwater recharge. So, unless we are careful in the water that we extract from these aquifers, we are actually ending up mining groundwater, like we mine for coal. It's like coal mining. We have taken out water in central India, which took thousands of years to accumulate below the ground within the last 30 years. And today there are aquifers which have run completely dry. So it's very important. I gave that one small graphic on the diversity of aquifer systems and what we need to do. So we did manage to, and one of the questions you asked earlier, to complete the answer to that question, we were able to initiate a major program of the government of India, which is a groundwater recharge program based on the mapping of aquifer systems in India, which is the largest aquifer mapping exercise ever undertaken anywhere in the world, and then involving local communities to actually try and manage that groundwater sustainably. Unfortunately, that's still in a very in stages of infancy, but that's the kind of example that India holds for the world over. A lot of people from Africa are coming to India to understand. They are very excited by the possibilities of groundwater extraction, and I always tell them, learn from the experiences of India, Pakistan, and China, and the mistakes we have made. But yes, you can also learn from the innovations that we are undertaking, so that you don't make our mistakes and then come to the truth after that, but learn from what we did wrong, and learn also from what we are doing right, so that you make the right decisions right from the beginning, understand the aquifer, and use groundwater sustainably. So don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Mm. So this question kind of overlaps a bit with what we've discussed before, but we'll see if you have anything to add. So it says, in final analysis, it comes down to organizing people to demand change and act creatively to put their vernacular ideas into practice. This is a hugely political task, and there is really a need for a cadre of water activists at the local level. So if you have anything to add related to suggestions on how you might go about this, kind of given your experience.
So this is music to my ears. I mean, this is the most important, change that we have to bring about. The work we are doing at Shiv Nadar University, for example, the program in rural management that I initiated 3 years ago, and the kinds of students we get. So what we do is we get students from those geographies where water is becoming such a major problem, where livelihoods are in a crisis, and we are trying to build a cadre of change makers, of leaders of the future, who deeply understand these issues from an academic perspective. We also take them to the ground. They are all coming now to, I've actually come here to my field location where I worked for the last 30 years, waiting for my students to arrive, because I'm going to now teach them how you can, actually implement solutions which reflect this paradigm shift in water. And we need to create leaders of this change, so that they then go back to the areas, and they are all committed to doing that, and create a greater awareness and mobilization around issues of water and sustainable livelihoods. So this is a large movement we need to create, and many of the partners in civil society who have worked on these issues have given rise to this program, which we are now teaching at the Shiv Nadar University, and all of them are involved with us. So we are trying to actually create exactly what you're describing through this initiative, but many, many more universities, many other institutions need to become part of this large process of change, without which all of this will remain largely a pipe dream, not realizable on the ground.
Yeah. Okay, another question. You shared that cropping pattern, which currently favors rice, wheat, and sugar, need to be rationalized. What has been your experience in the attempt to rationalize the cropping pattern?
Yes, again, this is, I just give you an example. One of the water stressed states of India is Maharashtra. And it's not such a water abundant region, but they have been growing sugarcane. And 4% of the state's area is devoted to sugarcane. But you know how much water sugarcane takes? The irrigation water is 65%. So I told the chief minister who was asking me, sir, how do I solve my water problem? I said, bring the percentage of sugarcane down from 4% to 2%. Maharashtra will be a water abundant state. This is just an example. I mean, what we have done on the ground in many states is fundamentally to include in the public procurement. So government procures rice and wheat from the farmers at an affordable price, at a price which makes it remunerative for farmers to grow rice and wheat. What we have said is include more agroecologically resilient crops, more nutritious crops, and people say, then what will we do with those crops? Nobody eats those millets and oilseeds and pulses that you talk about. But I said, we run the largest nutrition programs for children in the world. We have a preschool nutrition program. We have a school midday meal program. If we introduce into these programs these nutritious and less water intensive crops, we transform the water economy and the nutrition and health economy of the country. And many states have moved in this direction. An eastern state of Odisha has introduced millets, and it's actually introduced what it calls a millet mission. And that has made a dramatic change in the kind of nutritious food children are getting. Also through the public distribution system, where we sell subsidized grain to people who can't afford to buy grain in the open market. They have introduced the millets into that system also. So people are changing their dietary patterns, because that is, see, everything is linked. Unless you change the dietary pattern, unless you change the structure of incentives for farmers, this they will keep growing water incentive crops, although water is itself running out. So there's a major crisis. More than 400,000 farmers have committed suicide in India over the last 30 years. This is a very grave agrarian crisis we are facing. And these are elements of the solution that we need to implement.
Okay. So there's a number of comments that I'll just quickly go through. Not really questions, but somebody said beyond the mitigation measures, there is possibly a need to build alternative tourism hotspots and also a campaign to convince people that the Himalayas is majestic, even if it is not Shimla or Darjeeling.
So I'll just make a caveat on tourism. See, the problem is also with the tourists. The Himalayas were, places of pilgrimage for people of India and the neighborhood traditionally. But pilgrimage was something, an activity of penance, of, you go to the mountains. It's like a trek. So today we want all the facilities. We want wide roads. So there's a major problem in the Himalayas in India, because we are creating such wide roads that we are destroying the ecological landscape and actually creating more incidence of landslides. So tourism has to be eco-friendly. You cannot demand all the comforts that you are used to having in a big metro when you're going to the Himalayas. I mean, if you respect the Himalayas, then also learn to, as I say, weave your interventions into the contours of the Himalayas. Respect the Himalayas, and then the Himalayas will respect you and protect you.
So there's a number of other comments in the chat, but I'll just skip to the last question and we'll end on that. But they said, how do I become a water activist? Where do I start?
Well, there are many answers to that question possible, I suppose. You could start in your own neighborhood if you feel motivated enough, or you could, join one of our academic programs, learn more about water, learn more about the interconnections of water with so many other sectors of the economy and society. And once you are equipped with that kind of understanding, you can go back either to your own area or to other areas to try and actually make a change happen in water, because that is the heart of the solution we are looking for. We need, water cadre, water activists, water warriors, as sometimes they are called, because without that, the change in water is not going to happen. Politicians need to understand that if they don't change the paradigm on water, we are not going to elect them again. That pressure is not coming from the ground up, because the crisis, although it is deepening, some shortcut solutions have been found which temporarily alleviate the problem of water, but don't provide sustainable or equitable or inclusive solutions. And that problem is coming home to bite us. And the sooner we realize, or we make our policymakers realize the urgency, the urgent need for that change, the safer we are all going to be. Otherwise, well, we are in for a hard time going ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your insightful presentation and for this discussion. I'd also like to thank the audience members for attending the Last Drop, our Water Researcher Speaker Series. I should note that we have another event coming up as part of the series this fall. On November 5th, we'll have a panel discussion on water and climate justice with leading scholars including Deborah McGregor, M.A. Kraft, Anais Roque, and Linda Mendez Barrientos, as well as Samir Shah. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind putting the registration link in the chat for folks, we'll also be advertising for that on our social media and via emails. So I hope that some of you will be able to join us for that. For those of you who don't know already, or just a reminder that we've posted recordings of previous webinars to our website as well as to the YouTube channel, and this talk will also be presented there. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Shah. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so glad that the U of M is collaborating and co-chairing this hub with Shiv Nadar University. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.